welcome to the Shadow-Cast. I'm Jan.
Paul back again. Glad to be here.
So today we've got this lady, Helen Fisher, again, who studies the science of love, and she's been doing this survey of, now it's 75,000 total Americans who have answered anonymously this survey on love and what people are looking for in love, and kind of like a...
You know what really impressed me was that it was 200 questions.
200 questions, yeah.
A lot of questions.
So 5,000 people a year.
At 200 questions.
200 questions each. And many of the questions stay the same, but then they ask new questions as like new, trends are happening and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So she's found out a lot of things about dating, and especially internet dating these days, and how things have changed and what people are looking for. So, were we going to watch a clip first?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's check it out.
Let's do.
So Dr. Helen Fisher is a renowned biological anthropologist, and she's a senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. She's written 6 books on the evolution, biology, and psychology of human sexuality, monogamy, adultery, divorce, gender differences in the brain, the neural chemistry of romantic love and attachment, human biologically based personality styles, why we fall in love with one person rather than another, hooking up, friends with benefits, and the future of relationships, what she calls, and I love this, slow love. She's looked at marriage and divorce in over 80 societies, adultery in over 42 cultures, and patterns of monogamy and desertion in birds and mammals, as well as gender differences in the brain.
Well, yeah, fascinating. I mean, she sounds like a woman who knows what she's talking about.
Qualified, right? She's been doing this research for 50 years. She has data now on 70,000 people. She does some other stuff we're going to get to in another video, but mainly one of the main things that she has discovered is that there are 3 main brain systems that have to do, one with lust, the sex drive, one with attraction, what we might call romantic love, and then the other one with attachment. So what gets us together to, spread our genes around, what keeps us focused on one human for a time long enough to have a kid and raise a baby, at least to a certain age. I think in another video she said a couple years. And then the attachment, what keeps us together.
I see. So sort of like the 3 stages of a relationship almost, right? Like if you were going to have a long-term relationship, you would pass through, presumably and hopefully, from lust. So you found the person attractive to begin with, and you were into them. And then you moved into the attraction stage, and that became your sort of real primary relationship, and then moved into the attachment set, which kept you around for a long-term marriage.
Well, I think we're going to bust some myths here in this podcast, because these systems, they're independent systems, and they are base systems, and she is arguing that these systems have been around for 4 million years. So we're hardwired to these systems, so they can act independently. Like, for instance, you can have sex with somebody you're not in love with, or be in love with somebody you don't have sex with. That's a lot of marriages, right? Or be attached to somebody that you have neither with. So they are independent systems, but they can work together.
Yeah. Sure.
So one myth is that we go from, like you said, from one stage to another, but they can all still be active. And maybe the biggest thing that I took from this, and we're going to have a really nice clip at the end, where she talks about, so basically they put these people into functional MRI scans. So thousands of people that they've done this with. Some of these videos are older, and so at this point, I think she's talking, at that point she only had 5 people, but it's a ton of people by now. But they put them in these brain scans, and so there were people who said they were still in love. So, our popular notion is, you're in love at first, and you're under the influence of a lot of dopamine and serotonin and all that kind of stuff, and you're on this high. Most people, are obsessively thinking about that person, and most people think that passes after a while, and I think for most people it does. But she interviewed intensive interviews and then put them in the fMRIs and could prove that these people who said that they were still in love after 25 years, they could actually prove it with their brain scans. They had the same brain scans as those people who had just fallen in love and were obsessed with their partner. Fascinating, I thought.
Pretty neat, really. I mean, certainly some sort of scientific confirmation for just not taking their word for it, and like to be able to see that those patterns validated their statements, I guess certainly warrants a deeper dive to say, well, what do you do that in your relationship? What are your philosophies that led you to achieve this place? Those would be very interesting people to hear conversations from those folks.
Yeah.
But I guess that she's
more of a scientist
she's
and
gonna sort of-
studies the brain neurology and stuff,
Yeah.
but she did give us some clues, and we'll get to some of that at the end of the video.
Cool.
About what were some of the things that these people did to stay in love over that period of time. And actually, you bring in some more neurotransmitters and hormones. So let's get to that part. On the lust, you have the estrogens and the androgens at work. So testosterone, that makes total sense, right? That's our most famous of the androgens. So that's, so the evolutionary reason for that is you're just seeking a partner, any partner within a certain range. I mean, they're not going to seek a sick animal or whatever. They're going to seek a partner, but you're less picky when the lust, when the sex drive, when the testosterone and all that is kicking in.
But wait a minute, because this seems like there seems to be something I don't quite understand here, because like if I was to go out thinking about my own life and times when I feel what I consider lustful, right? It's very person specific, or maybe two people specific, but it's definitely not like a general lust, right? Like I've never had the experience of sort of like going out and thinking, God damn, I'm gonna get laid tonight if it's doesn't matter as long as they can speak.
You haven't had that experience? Can we hear from the men that have had that experience? Because I've known a lot of them.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially at a certain time of night at the bar. They're just looking around for who.
Oh, yeah. That's gross.
I know, and it's more prevalent when you're younger and you have more testosterone and all that. Her wording was, seek sexual union with any appropriate member of the species, so appropriate. So back in the animal, when we were more animalistic humans, we were looking for maybe they're younger, they look healthy, there's a thing about the symmetry of the face, knowing that they have good genes, that kind of thing. You're not gonna go try to, fuck somebody's grandma or a sick
if
member.
we turned this into maybe
today.
some kind of language that people would use, you think they're hot. You're willing to fuck anybody that you
attracted
think
to
is
them.
hot.
So tell me if this is true, because I've heard this, and I love trying to understand the male brain because it's so different from the female brain, it seems. Although she says we have a lot of similarities, but what I've heard from many men is that when they see a woman, it's like a yes/no. I would fuck her or I wouldn't fuck her. Is that true?
I mean, yeah, I suppose. There's that initial.
It's a sorting process.
Yeah, there's an initial thing, right, which that happens, right? But that doesn't mean that that's like a hard line. Like, I mean, there's been many times that I haven't found anybody particularly physically attractive, but then as I got to know them, I thought they were incredibly attractive, and I'm really interested in them on a different level, which doesn't mean that I would exclude sex from that, but then definitely. The other way is true too. It's just like I often see especially when I was younger, still, but I'm not really that interested now, so it's different. But like when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, I would see a woman, and I would think, oh god damn, she's like I would definitely fuck her, right?
And then she'd open her mouth.
And then I would start talking with her, and I'd go, oh Jesus, like what the hell? Yeah, she's like a psychopath. And no interest at all. So So yeah, I think there's like a grading process, but I think it's I think it's subjective. I think it depends on what happens. For me, it depends on what happens next. Right?
So maybe we have some nuances about, how we've evolved over time or whatever. But
And
anyway,
what about you? But what about you? In Lust, what about your? Do
uh,
you just have a line? You see guys and you think yes and no, or?
I'm way different than most people. I'm super picky, and for me, it's more like a spiritual thing, and a part of me that I don't give away to just anybody. But yeah, it's been super hard. I've had like 2 one-night stands in my whole life. It's just
So
it's not
that's about
satisfying.
the-
It's not emotionally satisfying for me. So that's where we're going to get to this other part.
Mm-mm.
So the lust.
So you don't lust, basically, what you're saying.
I mean, I'll see a guy and I'll go, oh, he's hot. He's he's a good. That's a good-looking guy.
But you don't think, God damn, like you don't feel it in your groins.
Not usually, no. No.
You don't think.
Yeah. But the difference between the lust and the attraction, the romantic love, is that you have far more partners possible with the lust side of it than you do with the attraction. So now we're going to go to the attraction.
So lust is like Tinder.
Well, there's a few things that we've already said that is going to be in our next interview. This lady has done surveys with these 75,000 people over the course of 13 years, and so anonymously have surveyed all these people, and she's associated with Match.com, but the audience is not Match.com that she draws the surveys from. It's like from the census, so she's got people of all ages, of all races, of all genders, all that kind of stuff. So the answers to those questions will be in our next video.
Nice.
So the attraction, so she's calling that romantic love, and that's the dopamine and norepinephrine system. So dopamine's the neurotransmitter of reward. So, and also your serotonin drops with this, strangely enough. But that's where you're focusing on one member of the species to conserve your mating time and energy is kind of the evolutionary explanation of it.
But wait, like, I get that this lady is, she works for Match.com, and so she's got some sort of marching orders when she has to do her surveys.
She's their scientific technical advisor.
Yeah, and so Match.com is a monogamous site, right? So of course her thing, like this sentence here that says focus on one member of the species to conserve. That's such a monogamous.
She's been doing this for 50 years. She's only been working with Match for 13. This is from her scientific research.
Okay, but this idea that you focus on one member.
So when we're talking about the difference between lust and romantic love and these different neurotransmitters and hormones that come involved, it's like now there's this one person you've selected out that you're in love with, that you're focusing your energy and your attention on, that this is the person that seems different from all those other people. This is the person I'm choosing to have as my boyfriend or girlfriend or marriage partner or whatever. And it's almost like the beneficial qualities of everybody else kind of recedes into the background because this person becomes more important to you. And there's a hormonal reason and a neurotransmitter reason that happens.
Sort of an infatuation.
Infatuation, love, romantic love, all of those words.
Okay.
And it's interesting, and so you're craving for an emotional union with this person. So this is where you want that person to be like, choosing you as well, and you're emotionally attached to this person. You're thinking about this person. You want them to call. You're watching for their texts. You're watching. You notice that it's a car that drives by. That's their car. That kind of stuff.
So only
So
for a free relationship, or then like what people would say
When you're
is
in
the
love.
honeymoons,
When you're in love.
the honeymoon phase.
So when you're in love, there's a certain pattern that appears on your brain scan. And most of us are under the impression that is a fleeting time. It might last 3 months and it might last 3 years, but most of us feel that passes. And I think in most people it probably does. But she has found that same brain scan pattern shows up in some of these like older couples that have been together for 25 years who say they're still in love. I've met some of these couples. It's like they adore each other. They're still laughing at each other's joke. They're going out dancing, and when one of them passes, the other is devastated.
Sure.
And really can't ever find that same.
I feel like I've got that kind of a relationship.
Yeah, you have a great relationship. relationship.
And somebody that I've been with for more than 20 years that I feel still like we're in a great place, you know, and I think there's a lot of things that take place to make that happen, right? There's a sort of not taking each other. For us, I think the reasons are completely different maybe than what she's saying, but I think I'm very interested to hear what she has to say about it.
So when it's the long-term happy, I was going to save this till the end, but when it's the long-term happy, the brain scan shows that they have all of these three regions still active. They still have the lust, the attraction, and the attachment regions still active, but then it incorporates other regions that are linked to empathy, controlling your own emotions, controlling your own stress, and what she calls positive illusions. So is it that these people naturally have these qualities, or have they learned to develop these qualities? But basically, you know, they're controlling their own emotions. They're not maybe immediately going to get angry at the other person. They're controlling their own stress. They're kind of taking responsibility for their own emotions and everything. But they have this thing called positive illusion. And this is something that's interesting that other relationship experts will talk about too, where you focus on the positive of the person, not the negative.
A good thing, right?
And we do that naturally when we first meet somebody. We ignore all the negative stuff that we see and are just focused on the positive because we got the lust thing going and the beginning phases of the attraction, romantic love thing going. But if we can continue that through the relationship, we can remain in love, it seems like what she's saying.
Yeah, and I think part of that, you know, like from the relationships that I've had the privilege of getting to know, because you know I'm one of those people that people often confide in me in their relationship problems, you know.
Me too.
And maybe because I have a good, healthy relationship, or
And you're calm and you're not judgmental or anything.
yeah, no, I'm definitely not judging. And so yeah, so I've had the privilege of listening to a lot of people's problems, and so often they just seem to be. I mean, I don't want to sort of reduce them all into just a couple little sentences or something, but in general, the sort of pattern seems to be that you start taking each other for granted.
Exactly.
And you start thinking about them like they're yours.
Right.
Rather than they are this other conscious being that continues to choose to be with you, you know?
And that I attracted them and I caught them and now the work is done. I don't have to work anymore. They're mine.
Yeah, and that sort of element of possession, I think, is something that really affects relationships, and I think to their detriment, you know, because I think also the sex can get stale, right?
Everything. You don't date anymore, so a lot of the relationship experts would say you need to continue dating. You need to go out on a date night at least once a week, preferably twice. And treat each other like you did at the beginning. Be interested in each other and talk about things and have fun together. Have new experience. Novelty is a big thing here to keep the attraction going, to keep the romantic love going.
Yeah, and I would say new sexual experiences, right, is the most important part of keeping your relationship sexually alive. Is that you are not the only people that it's one thing to say you only want to have one very serious emotional partner, right? That you want to have one long-term partner that you're committed to raising children with, or whatever. That's I think a separate thing. But having this idea that simultaneously you're only going to be sexual with this one person, I think that's just a fucking recipe.
Well, that's our topic for the polyamory.
Yeah, we should do
podcast.
Yeah.
That's too big to go into in this one.
But I think, you know, this woman is, in one way, she seems like she's in defense of, like she's saying, like, you know.
Well, again, on the other one that we do on her, she's going to talk about what she found out on surveys of people who did try polyamory and what they found out about that, and how many people felt like that was a path they wanted to go to, and how many people tried it out and said, I learned a lot, but it's not for me. You know, and I think it takes a certain kind of person to be able to handle that emotionally.
Yeah,
But you can have novelty within your own relationship in every way, trying new experiences, traveling together, mountain climbing or whatever is your jam, and new sexual experiences. And yeah.
yeah, right. But I think, and simultaneously, that happiness, that the one thing that I don't think we get into, but we were sort of talking a little bit about this before we started recording, which is if you're using sex as a tool / weapon in order to win and manipulate your male partner into doing what you want them to do in some other area, then you might as well just flush that relationship right down the toilet right there, because the minute you make that choice is the minute that you have ended the very beginnings of what was lust and that attraction, and you're now manipulating that, and you're just destroying your own happiness, right? So you think you've got this clever little trick that you're doing that's going to get you what you want, and if you want to give in to that brat part of yourself, then by all means, but don't simultaneously think that at the end of it you're going to have a healthy, happy relationship, because those two things cannot coexist.
Well, and a lot of relationships do last in spite of that, and to be honest, it's mostly women that are doing the psychological and physical manipulation of their partners in that way. But I agree, it won't be a healthy relationship. But let's, again, another podcast, but a lot of women, let me just make this one statement, a lot of women do use sex to manipulate their partner, and I think it's because they're not having a good time with sex, they're not getting satisfied. I'm putting that on them as much as on the men.
Yeah.
But if it's something that doesn't mean anything to you, but it means a lot to the partner, then that's more enticing for them to use it as manipulation. But anyway, moving along.
So
one thing I thought really fascinating about the attraction thing, and then I want to move on to attachment so we don't make this too long. But one fascinating thing about the brain scans, I keep saying,
the brain scams.
brain scans of people who are in love and in this attraction phase, no matter how long it lasts, is that it activates this part of your brain, and these are deep-seated parts of the brain. Actually, we need to play that other clip pretty soon here, that are, according to her, I don't know how science could possibly measure this stuff, but 4 million years old, these 3 different parts of the brain that are at the brain stem, the base of the brain, that are right next to the parts of the brain that have to do with thirst and hunger. They're just really basic drives. But the one that has to do with the romantic love attraction part also has to do with like obsession and rumination. And so they found that the brain scan of the person, I did it again, brain scan, I'm going to turn to you, you just say the word, of the people who were like actively in the beginning stages of being in love, they're just like really enmeshed with that other person, that brain scan looks the same as somebody who's in love and has just been dumped. Fascinating. So they're still in love and they're still obsessed and ruminating, but they've also got the pain and all that kind of stuff. And that's why when you've been dumped, you're like, what did I not see? What did I do? You just over and over in your head are trying to figure out what you could have done differently or whatever. Really strange.
Huh. Well, let's watch this next clip and see what's going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our newest experiment is been hatched by my colleague Art Aaron, putting people who are reporting that they are still in love in a long-term relationship into the functional MRI. We've put 5 people in so far, and indeed we found exactly the same thing. They're not lying. They basically, the brain areas associated with intense romantic love still become active 24.
Yeah, so pretty interesting. I mean, sometimes with these things I really have trouble trying to understand, kind of like, I don't know. Okay, but so what? You know what I mean? Like, okay, but there's people in the brain scans, where you scans, these lights light up on it. I mean, I don't know, it just seems so okay, we gave them a lie detector. Like she could have said, yeah. So they said that we gave them all. They said they were still in love, so we put them under a fucking lie detector test. And fuck you, you're wrong, right? Like what is the I guess the goal? The only thing my brain can come up with, right, is like, okay, so good. So they were telling you the truth, and it is possible to still be in love with somebody after 25 years. Huh?
But I think most people, and I agree with what you're saying about sometimes the science is doing such a mechanical thing, like they can study the brain and this lights up and whatever, but they still don't know what consciousness is. And they still truly don't know what love is. They know what parts of the brain light up and whatever. But for me, it was validating to hear that you can stay in love. To me, that's a hopeful thing, because otherwise you're thinking, okay, I meet this person, we have a couple of good years, and then after that it's just like routine and boring, and I never should have lived with this partner or whatever. So to me, it's like, if you know how to interact with the person, if you can control yourself and take and you're pretty clean of baggage of yourself, you treat that person with kindness, you go through these things and do the things that, do things together and just keep the relationship alive, you can stay in love and at least have a certain percentage of that same feeling when you first met. To me, that's very hopeful.
Yeah, that's a great message, right? Which is, for sure, you can still stay in love with somebody after decades, and like you can cultivate. I think the most important thing there is, you have to cultivate those relationships, right? And you have to nurture them.
Yeah.
And they have to be a priority to you. And if they aren't a priority to you, and you prioritize your kids, and you prioritize your work, and you prioritize doing projects around your house or whatever, then you are making choices that ultimately are going to have consequences. And much the same as, I think there's easy examples, right? Like if you smoke cigarettes, guess what? The long-term consequences, you might die of cancer, and like there's a definite correlation, right? But there's a time gap. But I think it's one of those places where we've come to accept time gap as real. But when it comes to relationships, we don't seem to have that same concept quite so clearly understood, that your actions today have long-term consequences in the quality of your relationship, and that those decisions affect things. And just to circle back on that wonderful video we did last week about the 8 conversations you should have before getting into a relationship. Not that I think we're going to do it.
But you can use that anytime in a relationship, but ideally before sex and all these hormones kick in.
But our plan, so please subscribe, is to do a video on each one of those date conversations and sort of dig into it. So hopefully you guys will get into it too. And we'll
big topics: sex, money.
Yeah, and so but all of those things, sex, because there's 2 horrible things, right, in a relationship. The first one is that you have different sexual needs, and you end up having to comply with the other person's needs.
Mismatched. Yeah.
And that is a fucking disaster, no matter whose needs get followed.
Right.
So if you're the guy and you want to have sex 2 or 3 times a week or more, then and your partner only wants to have sex
once a month,
then either you're going to have your sex twice a week, and most of the time, basically all the time, it's going to be fucking boring, or you're going to have sex only once a month for the rest of your stupid fucking monogamous ideology, all in defense of your stupidity, that you're only going to have sex once a month, and then that's going to become a huge issue.
But most people don't like to talk about sex. They're inept at talking about sex. They're scared to talk about sex, so they don't have those conversations beforehand. And maybe a woman's trying to trap him, and so she's having more sex than she wants to at first. But once they get married or move in together or whatever, then the truth comes out.
Do you think women are so manipulative like that?
All right. So we're getting off topic, but yeah, we're gonna have those dates. We'll probably post one of those every couple of weeks or so.
Sounds fun. And like, those are the true things too. Is like, if you've got a completely different perception of money, like long term,
Yeah.
that's
I'm a spender, you're a saver. You're always gonna be on my case, or I'm gonna be like hiding my purchases.
right. It's a carcinogen, and you're, it's going to affect you long term. It's going to have an effect on the relationship and on the ability for you to compromise. And I think the one thing that we both agree on is that it's much better and healthier to have a negotiation about things in advance of the relationship.
Right.
Not that things don't change, like, I mean, in my relationship, the amount of sex we had pre-kids versus post-kids, big change.
And that's hormonal too.
Yeah, and there's like, and also, it's like, it's not just a one-sided street. It's like, you're fucking exhausted because you're raising little babies, and so there's life events change people, and like, you have to be able to find a way to.
So if it's way off, like he wants sex 5 times a day and you want it once a month, that's probably not going to work, and it's good to know that right out of the chute. But if it's close enough, like he wants sex 5 times a week and I want it 2, but he's willing to go down to 4, and I'm willing to say, okay, I could go to 4, but you got to take me dancing and you got to do this other thing, this other romantic thing. If you know that going into it, then
Then
it
perfectly
could work. You
good.
got to be good at negotiating, and you got to know what you want, and you got to know what you can like live, not only live with, but be happy with going forward long term.
But a big but is you have to be good at openly negotiating. You can't be good at
Passive
secretly
aggressive
manipulation, right? That's not a fucking quality that you should have in a relationship. And a son,
So we're talking about most marriages right now, I think.
yeah, because I have a son like this.
Happens a lot.
Maniacal genius, right? Like, he could just manipulate his way through any situation. Just,
Your daughter too.
yeah, she's another up and comer. And so I inherited those traits, which I think of as skills, from my mother, who was also very much, she was the queen of the walk, man, and she could. She was a master of henpecking my father, and so I got to see that from an early age, and I quite knew very well what was up.
Who was the boss?
Well, who was really pulling the strings, and like, I can remember as early as 8 years old thinking to myself, I was getting hit by my dad, and I was like, this is because my mom has been holding out sex, and I accused my mother of it, and she was just aghast at the idea that it was, but I was right.
At the idea you figured it out.
And that was right. And so, I think in those situations, and with my son Leanie, I would say to him always, I would say, Leanie, this is a really wonderful tool you've got, and you could use this in life. If you were to become a defense attorney, if there's a lot of jobs where people could benefit from this. And you could use those skills to help other people, but you can't use them as a weapon against your own family. You can't then take those tools and then turn it into a weapon that then you assault people with because they lack the language skills that you've got, and so you always can outsmart them by, you kind of run them in circles until they're so confused they don't know what direction they were headed in to begin with, and then you just give them the new path. And I think that's such a common woman trait, that there's so many women that are involved in it, and I think that's not a path. You're not going to end up with a fulfilling relationship.
Okay, so this is not a podcast about bashing women. We want to represent the genders fairly. But I am somebody who does agree with the male side when women are manipulating men with sex. Again, like I say, a lot of women aren't sexually fulfilled, and we need to stand up for ourselves. And there is a lot of miseducation that men have about what women want, and we can maybe get into some of that in a podcast. I have a wonderful sex course from a guy who has counseled women for for 20 years.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the area.
And the good news is it can be easier for a man to please a woman. He's putting a lot of effort into stuff that doesn't work and that women don't want. So we can make it easier on you, and a woman can be more pleased, and she can want more sex. And honestly, I heard somebody say one time that sex is how adults play. And, you know, we all want that playmate. We want to have fun. We want to laugh. We want our partner to help make us laugh and vice versa. And sex is a thing that can be super fun. But, you know, each party needs to get satisfied one way or another. So, you know, you've got to be able to talk about sex.
Yeah, right. I mean, and in a way that's open, right? Because I think a lot of times people get, but also I think people get very embarrassed about, you know, what their sexual fantasies are, what their sexual needs are, and what brings them pleasure. And I think, I don't know, tell me something, what do you think? But I think that, so this is from the male view of women, right? Which is, yeah, so like when I've been with a lot of partners, and the one thing that my perception is that women seem to have a very hard time openly articulating what it is that they want and like. But if you know, like if you have like several different things that you maybe think, okay, well, look, I'm going to try this and see what the response is. There seems to be a physical response to what they like. Like it seems pretty obvious when somebody likes what you're doing, you know, sexually, because they're...
Yeah, but doing that same thing over and over for a period of time may not get them to the goal you're looking for. It's a complicated topic, and we don't want to go too much into it here, but I would say a couple of main things is that oftentimes women don't experiment on themselves as much, and a lot of women don't know what they want. And from my perspective, to have the sex conversation before you ever go to bed with the person is ideal, because then you can talk about this complicated topic that is a woman's body. A woman's body is very complicated, and there's a lot of things that can turn her off, and she can worry about, you know, the man's working too hard and whatever, and it turns off the thing and she doesn't get to the orgasm, which most people think is the goal. Doesn't necessarily need to be the goal. But you don't want to have that, you know, conversation during the act. The man will say, oh, just tell me what you want. You can't express that in a phrase. And it also kills the mood. So to be able to talk about it in advance, and the man to ask questions, and he thinks it's this way, and then you say no.
So this is a really interesting spot. Let's hang out here for a minute, because time to Dan, right? But this is actually like we're getting to the meat now. Maybe something that seems to me like a podcast on this one. But is... If I'm having sex with a woman and she says, what do you need? Man, I'm going to know. I can articulate it pretty quickly, right? I'm going to be like faster, slower, more force.
It's not that easy for a woman. It's not that, it's not that simple.
Yeah, but...
Well, okay, so you're not going to stop until I give you some meat on this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a little meat. So one of the things in the course that people don't realize is that woman needs to have the whole body warmed up. Foreplay is the whole body without touching the genitals.
Touching the whole body without touching the genitals.
Exactly. So that gets a woman warmed up. Also, for a man, it's almost the same pressure and stroke, just more of it and faster to get him to the orgasm. For a woman, if you do that same thing over and over, it will numb her out. It has to be changed up. So that's all I'm saying about that. Stay tuned for our other podcast. And let me finish the last little part, which we didn't even get to the third brain system.
We're still...
So this is maybe to most people the least important, but attachment is oxytocin and vasopressin, and that's your companionate love, your nesting, your social comfort, your emotional union. That's what keeps people together. The other thing I'll say about this is, for a woman, one of the reasons I like to have some of these conversations before I go to bed with somebody is when I have intercourse, it doesn't seem to kick in if it's just oral sex and orgasm that way. But if I have intercourse, it kicks in the oxytocin, and I automatically, immediately start to bond with the person. I start to fall in love with them, and then if I've only chosen that person for sex, I've fallen in love with somebody who's probably not my match on all those other topics. I've had it happen. It was a disaster. So, yeah, that's the bonding part.
Okay. I mean, so I don't know. I feel like we have presented this other woman's,
Three brain systems.
but I don't feel like we've had any real input of our own, right? Like I feel like we haven't said shit really. Like I feel like we're missing. Like there's something that feels so superficial about.
Well, we've talked about the science that talks about the three different brain systems, and we've presented that
But all of that
in enough detail.
But look, if I
And we have plenty of our own little,
But all of this
interjections.
seems to say science proves that we can go from a lustful stage to a honeymoon stage to a long-term relationship if we manage the relationship correctly. Like if we could take everything she's saying and just stick it in a little headline. That seems to be what it is.
I think it proves we got these three separate systems, and I think it also proves why we can stay in love, and there are ways we can talk about in other podcasts how we can stay in love, but it also helps me understand. There's probably women have maybe less of the androgens and more of the dopamine or whatever. Why men can separate the lust from the falling in love, and women have a little bit harder time of it. She hasn't gone so much into that research, but because there's these different systems, apparently men can keep that separate. The lust side is the more testosterone, so maybe because they have more testosterone than women, they're able to separate those two systems.
Yeah, I think that's true because I think that most men, maybe this is the place where we get to talk about something that seems like natural to ourselves, is that this is an interesting concept because I believe that most men are not monogamous. I believe they're forced to be monogamous by women who would prefer to be monogamous, but I think that the majority of men, if you said to 99% of men, look, you've got two choices. One, you can have sex with this woman for the rest of your life, and you're going to have a happy marriage. You're going to stay married. She's not going to take half your stuff in a divorce. And you're going to have full custody of your kids the whole time because she's not going to then use the kids like a weapon. Or you can have sex with your wife on her schedule, and you can also have these things on the side, and it's not going to have any negative effect on your primary relationship, and you are going to just feel much more sexually satisfied. 99% of men, if you could give them that guarantee, are going to say, sign me up for the polyamory course, and they're going to take it because we are definitely not designed to be accommodating your sex schedules, right? Like that's not what a man is. And I think this lust part, I think is very true, which is men have I have sex with people because I think they're sexually attractive. I don't have sex with them because I want to have a relationship with them. There's no part of me that wants to have a relationship with them. Maybe I'll have sex with them more than one time, but I'm not misleading them and saying this is something it isn't. I'm just saying openly, most men that I know, including myself, have no trouble being sexual with multiple people. And the only reason most of the guys that I know don't have sex with multiple people is because they're afraid of the consequences that the woman will unleash upon him because he made those choices, which is divorce, separated, use the kids, all the retributions that are in the woman's war chest because he was being himself, right? So they're closet polyamorists that don't feel safe, much the same, in my view, as homosexuals felt before 1990, right, where it wasn't cool to admit that you were gay, and you kept yourself in the closet and you didn't admit that you were gay because you were afraid of what would happen, the rejection from community and family and friends. And right now, we're living through another example of it, which is men who are not monogamous, who are being forced into monogamy through, I don't know, whatever we would call this. But what do you think?
I don't want this to be a woman-bashing podcast.
What's that? I'm not bashing women.
I think there are a lot of men who would have a hard time with their woman being sexual with a lot of men as well. I would like to see Helen do more research on, like I was saying, the difference between the lust and attraction portions of the brain between men and women. Because part of the reason I think a lot of men would have a hard time having their woman out having sex with a lot of men is because they would legitimately be afraid of their woman falling in love with somebody else and going off with that other man. And in my first marriage, my husband was behind my back cheating on me, and when I found out about it, I was trying to be the enlightened wife and, let him have sex with best friends and things like that. And at one point, he said, you would handle this a lot better if you were having sex with other people. And so I wasn't ready to go have sex with just anybody at the bar, but there was this really cute little Greek god that I saw, and finally I said, okay, I'm going to. And when I said that, he got scared. I could see it in his eyes. And as I walked out of the house for the weekend, he said, just don't fall in love. And I ended up becoming quite attached to this guy. I mean, I really, really liked this guy. I mean, he wasn't into, me and 3 kids, but I think it's a legitimate fear that guys can have. And I think this is the 2 ways that we're different.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying actually really supports what you were talking about earlier, which is how much different the female system tends to be on the attachment side versus the lust side. And then perhaps the middle ground, which it seems verified by science in some way, by the divorce rate, it seems like we can say we meet in the middle in attraction, and that it's the rare relationship that makes it into a 20-year-long time frame that stays attached, that's happy and not stale. I mean, we live here in Cuenca, in Ecuador, and there are a lot of retired married couples here, and I mean, Jesus, it's sad, man. I mean, they are so visibly miserable that it has taken over their poor sour faces.
And I think they just only think they're going to be more miserable alone, and that's why they stay together. But yeah, honestly, most marriages
life is a terrible thing to waste. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, what do you want to be? And so where are your values really at? And so, like, I think, here's a question, before we go on any further, talking about Greek God, right? Wasn't that one of the happiest times in your life? At the moment where, okay, your husband's out having sex, you don't feel responsible for his sexual, you're having your own sex life.
I would have been happier with that guy. Not staying. I wasn't happy with my husband, and I left my husband. I wouldn't have been happy if I would have had 2 guys I loved. I'm just not wired to make that work. I'm sorry. I'm a one-on-one kind of person, and my ideal relationship is to build over time and to have real depth and spirituality and explore sexually with that partner. Tantra and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that wouldn't have been ideal for me, but it showed me what I was missing in my marriage. I mean, he wanted lots of sex and he was a good lover, but because there wasn't the care, he didn't really love me, he didn't really care for me, he didn't really put me first, and because that wasn't there, it was empty sex for me, even though it was sexually satisfying. And again, I think this is where males and females differ. And so I would just guess that the men have just so much more testosterone that the lust prevails, and that women have so much more of the attachment, the oxytocin, prevails more for the woman than the man. And like you say, we meet in the middle on the attraction and the being in love part. But what would satisfy me over time is not the same that would satisfy a high testosterone man over time.
Right. And then so there's the impossibility of it, right? So if you think about just any context where you have somebody who has a strong sexual desire or need.
And not to say I don't have strong sex drive, I do, and I always have. I have a lot of testosterone too, but I just, the emotional attachment is super important to me.
Yeah, but you're kind of...
I'm weird in many ways. So.
But like I think the average, I think I read, maybe you tell me it's different, but I think the average that I read was that the average woman that's been married for 10 years wants to have sex once a week and maybe once every 2 weeks as the...
But what we haven't addressed is the hormonal part. As far as women's hormone, women have less testosterone than men anyway. We do have testosterone.
Sure, of course.
So obviously there's going to be, just because of that physical hormone, there's going to be a mismatch. And as women either go through childbirth and breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff, postpartum, their hormones are going to drop. As they get older, they're going to drop, and that's the problem with most women my age. Most women my age, if they tell me the truth, and they do often, is that they don't care if they ever have sex ever again. So it's a medical problem that they need to go get addressed.
Yeah.
And I have a really weird experience. I'll briefly say, because I've told you this before. When I went through menopause, I had hot flashes and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't going to go get hormones just because I couldn't handle some night sweats for, 6 months or a year or something like that. But I realized that hormones control everything in the body, and I wanted my body to function optimally, and that's the reason. And I went to this hotshot Italian doctor who had this new delivery system. He'd written a book. It was out in Palm Springs. I had to drive 2 hours to get to him. $500 a month, to do the thing. But he gave me, it was a pellet system that goes under your skin, and it releases the hormones naturally. When your body needs more, it'll draw more, and so it wasn't this big spike and drop. But he gave me progesterone cream, he gave me 1 pellet of estrogen, and he gave me 2 pellets of testosterone. And I asked him why he gave me twice as much testosterone as estrogen, and he said, your tests show you needed it. Personally, I think the guy, because he had the power to make every woman he met as horny as possible, I think he took that.
Thank you.
I think he did.
I think he
couldn't resist that. That's my personal theory. So I all of a sudden had the sex drive of a 19-year-old boy, and I wanted sex at minimum 3 times a day. And after a point, my husband went, get away from me.
I'd appreciate it if in the future when you tell a story you say, as a 19-year-old girl. Right? Because I'm really into the story, and all of a sudden you're like, you had the sex drive of a 19-year-old boy, and you lose me.
I think what I saw 19-year-old boys who thought about sex all the time and had to have it multiple times. See what I'm saying? Yeah. Because even some 19-year-old girls don't have that much sex drive. I felt like for the first time in my life, I understood men and their sex drive and why they're so focused on it. It was a biological need. I couldn't help myself. I had to relieve myself minimum 3 times a day. I was working corporate at the time. I had to go in the bathroom at lunchtime.
Get yourself off.
My husband left for work in the morning. I took care of myself after that, and then, maybe he wanted to have sex with me once a day.
Because you got your mojo.
So again, it's a partly a biological thing, but that's another thing that women can do to help, be more compatible with their husband. And one of the things was I felt alive. I just had so much life force, like pulsing through my veins. I loved it, but it just became unmanageable.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic because I think that this is one of those things that, from my view, affects every marriage. And I think it's the fundamental problem with the concept of monogamy, which is okay, you could get together with somebody, and at that moment in time, you're very sexually compatible. You can, like, I've had partners who, like, just can lay down just like me. You know, like they could just have sex multiple
Drop of a
times
hat.
and super passionate, super into it. And but that changes over time. And so anytime you're going to start having a longer term relationship with somebody, you have to expect, it's a realistic expectation to think our needs sexually are not going to stay exactly the same. And that it's not fair for a man to ask a woman to have sex more times a week than she really wants to have sex. And I think that's a really important point. You have to say, as a man,
Right, she shouldn't be doing it out of duty because
she
it's not
can't.
fun for her, and he can tell.
And for you, it's a fucking drag, right? Like, nobody likes that sex. So you might as well just have sort of got yourself off, right?
So that's a point for the emotional attachment.
Yeah.
You want to be emotionally involved in the sex act as well.
Well, also you want it to actually have some element of lust, right? You actually want it to be hot. You don't want it to feel like she's like over there checking her fucking cell phone while you're inside her waiting, responding to her friends' messages, right? Like, you want it to be something that it feels intense. So that's not fair. Of you as a man to ask your partner to have sex more often than she wants, and at the same time, it's not fair that the woman then somehow says, "Oh well, you can have sex just as often as I feel like having it, but if you try to want to have sex any more than that," because then she's doing the exact same thing. She's just controlling your sex drive to fit and suit her needs and convenience, and then she's doing the same thing to you that you would have been doing to her. It's exactly the same thing.
But are you trying to make this into a polyamory commercial? Because I don't think that suits most people.
But let's not talk about whether it's polyamory or not. Let's just talk about the fact that neither one of those two scenarios work.
Is good.
So if neither one of those two scenarios work,
Right.
then there has to be a scenario outside of those two that does function so that both people get their needs met.
And choose well, and have the discussions and the negotiations in advance.
But those negotiations
Don't choose somebody that's way unmatched from you.
Totally.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
And people do that. I mean, there's plenty of marriages where they're completely mismatched sexually.
and I don't know, from my view, I think that 99% of the time, I'd be delighted to know that it's not the case, but my view is that 99% of the time, it's the man who has to sacrifice in order to suit the woman. I don't see at all where the woman, in 2024, like, maybe y'all are fighting battles from the 1970s in your mind, but in 2024, I don't see any place where the woman is succumbing to the pressure of the man. I mean, please show me where that still lives. But from my view, it's the man who then has to squelch his sexual desires, who doesn't get the sexual attention that he wants and needs. And then he ends up bitter and annoyed and angry about it, and feels like, he's losing his life force, right? Like you don't have that.
So what's your solution for the people who really can't handle having?
I think
men get just as jealous as women do.
Absolutely. And I think, in fact, I think men are, or perhaps I would say men are even more insecure about their partner going out to have sex than women.
Especially if he has a bigger penis.
Yeah. Totally different scene.
Right, so what's the solution?
Well,
We're all about solutions, right? Come up with one on this.
no, I think two. I think I've got two. One, which is a new one for me for today, which I love of yours, is that if you really are committed to monogamous and you really just want to keep riding that fucking pale white horse to your grave, then take some goddamn testosterone and shove some of it under your fucking skin or up your ass or wherever you got to put it, so that you've got some kind of vigor in your life Yes.
And for the man, get some appropriate sex education on how to please a woman.
Well, I think that's two ways, right? Like, I mean, if you're a woman and you're not getting pleased by your man, like
That's a lot of women. I'm
you
sorry.
got nobody to blame but yourself, right? Like, there's nobody else. The buck stops with you, Presidente, because
I agree and I disagree. Women should speak up more and stuff. But however, if you haven't, and then years have passed, then it's really hard to bring that up that she hasn't been pleased all that time. Have that conversation.
but I mean, it's just like
But also, a lot of women don't know what will please them, and a woman's head is much more involved in sex than a man's is. And if she thinks that something's wrong with her, that she can't have an orgasm, then that's going to make her not be able to have an orgasm. So there's a lot. It's very complicated, and that's why some of these sex education courses can really help both parties.
Yeah, and also I think for men, I think one of the best things, that you can, I think the other part of that is you've got to get over yourself and have like a realistic expectation of people having needs, that are independent of your own, and recognize that, like, I know I've used this analogy before, but like, you don't swear fucking fidelity to your wife's cooking or to your husband's cooking. You don't like eat only one culture. Everybody on the planet that knows anything about food will say, if you'd like to eat some really great Chinese food, probably find some Chinese people that have a restaurant. There's exceptions, I know. And you want a great Italian food, go find some Italians. Like, you should probably focus on the culture. And yet there's all these wonderful sexual experiences that you can have that are completely different. And I'm somebody who's had sex with people from many different cultures. And man, the sex is different. And sex is like, you can't. I wouldn't be so crass as to try to rate one as better than the other and sort of rank them or something. But there are entirely different experiences, and they've all contributed to what I consider to be my well-rounded sexual and emotional experiences that lead me to feel satisfied in my life. And I don't see where there's room for that in most people's relationships. I don't see where most men, what I see is men are typically very docile. They don't get their needs met, and they get used to not getting their needs met, and then they just give up. And then what do you think is going to happen when a guy gives up? What do you think the net effect of that is to you, the woman in the relationship? It's going to destroy your relationship. How do you think you're going to have a happy, long-lasting relationship if both people are not getting their needs met on a regular basis? That to me just seems like as obvious as
Okay.
right?
Okay, I just don't want to pound this in the ground.
But what are we pounding? This is what everybody wants to hear. The hour, yeah. Well, yeah.
Anyway, we want to know what you guys think.
Yeah.
Just our humble opinions.
Well, and I, listen, I really welcome some hate mail. Just
Dress it down.
Yeah. Bring it on. You got something to say? Like.
But anyway, we appreciate it if you like and subscribe and comments.
Or thumbs down it.
Yeah.
Anything. It's a show of emotion.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye.